present you a short report on the activities of the Minimal Standards Working Group, and probably also provide you some insight on why we actually still exist as such. So, brief outline should be self-explanatory. Who we are, what we wanted to do, what we actually ended up doing, and what we propose to continue to do over the next year. So the goal of minimal standards is to develop, maintain, and promote minimal reporting standards for AIRR-seq data. Importantly, so this is really about the reporting standards. So what needs to be reported, not necessarily how it needs to be reported, which is something I will come back to towards the end of the talk. You see our member, we have a total of 14 active members during the last reporting period. Demographics, we're getting a little bit more male dominated, unfortunately, with most of the people coming from North America and 4 other people from the German-speaking countries. So these are only the people who actively participated, and we have another 55%, or we have another, basically double the number on the mailing list. So people who are somehow interested in our outputs, but don't show up on the calls. So for those of you who were in Genoa, a short recap, what we set as our goals there was to work a little bit on standards for single cell data, work on standards for reactivity data, and continue with the ontologies and vocabularies activity. This is a cross-section topic together with Common Repo and the data repository, with Common Repo and data representation groups. And then there was the idea to transition into a standing committee. The product of this one would have been, or that we could deliver now, is a new standard and a sprint report, as you will see in a minute. Okay, so what did we then do? We, as I said, we worked on ways how to standardize information on single cell data within AIRR-seq. This is this work, again, as a collaborative work with data rep, and made it into the AIR data schema 1.3 release, which went out in June of this year. And you will find the detailed notes in the AIR community docs, which is really the go-to site for any of that, any of the outputs that either minimal standards or data rep or common repo is producing. So that's docs.aircommunity.org. Then continuing on, standards for reactivity data. We have a draft proposal for this one, which is on our GitHub repo, and it's scheduled to be included into the upcoming 1.4 release of the data standards, which you can expect to see early next year. Then we had another sprint for the ontologies and vocabularies team. Again, so this team was originally formed because we considered this to be a cross-section topic between the 3 working groups. We did some cleanup from the last sprint that we did at the end of 2018. But the really big new thing was that we found a way to support basically the same ontologies from multiple providers using queries to abbreviate the AIRRs, so the kind of the IDs for the ontology objects. And so thanks again for Björn Peters to point us towards that, because that was really helpful. We did some progress on ontologies for both for mouse streams and for geolocation, but didn't manage to finalize those during that sprint. And so therefore, this is something for the upcoming sprint, probably also early next year. Okay, and again, you will find the full report of the sprint in the docs. Then come into the topic of the transition towards the standing committee. The idea in early 2019 regarding the standing committee was that standing committees would be, in contrast to working groups, be committees who take care of activities of things like maintenance activities. However, what we realized over the last 1.5 years is that on the one hand, that there is a continued need for these standardization activities. So that the idea to have a maintenance committee with just a couple of people who then spark ad hoc working groups to try to deal with arising issues wouldn't really work, because we would basically have this ad hoc working groups all the time. So therefore, it really doesn't make any sense to have such a construct to start with. The second thing is that the concept of what a standing committee is got actually redefined during our work on the new AIR governance document, where standing committee is now more considered to be an AIRR-C internal working group, and therefore requires everyone on that committee to be official member of the AIR community, which is something that we consider to be incompatible with our more stakeholder-friendly approach of the working groups, where basically every interested party can get involved without having to join the AIR community. So therefore, we basically stopped this transition. Good. The other reason for not to do the transition, and this is then the big thing for which also brings me to the proposed plans for for the next year, is that actually, as minimal standards, we propose not to continue as a separate working group. Because what we realized together with data reps is that in the end, it has been all the same people on all the same topics on 3 different calls a month, which is really not the best use of anyone's time. And so what we therefore did is that we had joint calls of these 3 working groups, so minimal standards, common repo, and data rep, for the last 6 or 7 months. And this was relatively efficient, and we made quite good progress without having to repeat over and over talking about the same topics. So therefore, we really think all 3 working groups think that this is the way to go for, at least for the majority of the topics. So therefore, we would like to propose the establishment of a new working group. Proposed name for that one is Standards Working Group. You can also call it Data Standards Working Group. This is really up for input, which will absorb minimal standards and data rep, and the more format or data-oriented parts of from the Common Repository Working Group. And again, I said the reason for this is that outputs of these working groups are closely connected and overlapping, so it's not that one group really would decide anything without conferring with the other. So therefore, it's really meaningful to put all of this together. That this standards working group then will take care of the AIR data schema. It will take care of the common exchange formats, which is the main output of the data representation working group, the ADC API, minimal reporting requirements. So this is the thing that you can mainly think about as the main output of what minimal standards was, and continue with ontologies and vocabularies and persistent identifiers. Okay, and as Brian will tell you later on, COM repo will continue with topics focusing more on the AIR data commons itself. Good, and so with this one, don't yet at the 10-minute mark, but there's really nothing to talk about, so I would hand it back to Nina.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christian. It's never a bad thing to end early. Because we do have a minute or two, are there any questions from the attendees regarding Christian's proposals with respect to reorganization of the minimal standards data representation and parts of common repository into a standards working group? Just checking the chat, or so you can use the Q&A right function. We see no open questions at the moment. Okay, and yeah, I think it's very clearly laid out, Christian, and having greater efficiency and fewer meetings. We're all a fan of that. So we can also, if there are more detailed comments that people may have, we can also talk about this further in the hot topics section